The tale of a British toddler going missing while abroad on holiday is one that we know all too well. And I think that we're all picturing the same innocent young girl who went missing from Portugal. But what if I told you that Madeleine McCann was not the first? In fact, what not many people realise is one of the reasons why the Madeleine McCann case initially grew to the extent it did was because we had been here before. Ben Needham was the blonde-haired toddler who disappeared on the Greek island of Kos, never to be seen again. Instead, a 35-year ordeal has taken place in which Ben has still not been found. So why is it that, in my opinion, people believe that there's way more chance of Ben Needham still being found than other high-profile missing children? Well, it could be the multiple men that have since come forward claiming to be Ben. The historic tales that came to light about a woman who could have potentially taken him, and an official police narrative that just doesn't quite add up. This is the case of the British toddler that went missing, Ben Needham.
Before we get into this, I just want to say that we will leave a link in the description to the family's Facebook page. So if you know anything to do with this case and potentially where Ben might actually be, then there will be a link in the description and hopefully we can actually help this case. Now, let me get into explaining what was going on around the time that Ben goes missing. Because in the early 1990s, the UK was struggling. And that's because unemployment was very much rising, with over 2 million people out of work. And not only that, wages were stagnating and people were struggling to put food on the table. It was getting harder and harder to own your own home. And that was because interest rates peaked at over 15%, which meant even if you owned your own home, you actually ended up getting negative equity. And even if you tried to sell it, very often you aren't able to sell it, even at a huge discounted rate. But it wasn't just that. Brits were getting sick of the weather, sick of the dark nights, and they wanted to find a simpler, happier life. And therefore, they were looking at places abroad. And they were doing that because they were switching on their TVs and there were shows all the time, like A Place in the Sun or various other shows like that. And they were promising a better life in other locations. So people started looking into Spain, into Portugal, into Italy, but also into Greece. And that's because Greece, as a tourist place for Brits, was going up massively. In 1990 alone, there were over 9 million tourists that travelled from Britain to Greece. And that was up from just 35,000 in 1950. So the increase was absolutely massive. And as I'm sure you'll know, Greece is made up both of a huge country, but also a lot of various different islands. And one of those islands is called Kos. And Kos is a very small Greek island in the Aegean Sea. And it's so small, in fact, that you can drive across it in under an hour. And at the time, it was primarily built for tourists. Obviously, you've got beautiful houses and villas, but you've also got lovely restaurants and, most of all, absolutely stunning beaches. And so you can understand why a couple called Eddie and Christine Needham fancied taking a trip to Kos and actually relocating there full time.
They have. And before I tell you about how much they loved the island of Kos, have you ever been to Greece yourself?
I've never been to Greece. No.
Have you not?
I've never. Have you?
Oh, I've proper greased it up, yeah.
Okay, where have you been?
All the authentic Greek sort of places.
Yeah, go on.
I went to Malia.
Yes.
That's it.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine. I didn't know Malia was part of Greece.
I'm sure it's a Greek island, yeah.
Okay, is it?
Oh, people might tell me if I'm wrong here. No, I think Malia, I'm confident, I'll stand on it. Malia's a Greek island,
Yeah,
I believe.
Fine.
Kos, right, when I was younger, which is obviously a decade or so after these events took place, maybe a couple of decades by the time I was going on holiday and things like that.
Yeah.
Kos, for that sort of age generation, you'll remember this from when you left school, lads' holidays and stuff like that. Bit of a party island.
I never knew anyone that went to Kos.
Really?
No, Cyprus was the main one that my mates went to.
So you know when people were doing like Napa, and like I said, Malia, stuff like that, you had two that just don't really get visited now. I don't think people might still do it, but Kos and Kavos.
Yes.
Kavos, people don't go there partying as much anymore. I'll give you another one, Falaraki. That might be a Greek island, I'm not sure.
Sounds Greek.
But Falaraki was another one that people used to go to party Kos was a bit like that. However, at this point, I don't think it had developed into that. I don't want to call it a tourism trap, but I definitely don't think it had developed into that. And like you say, a lot of people felt that it was the ideal place to be able to raise a family.
A lot of these Greek islands tend to be quite quiet, sort of calm places. And this is exactly what you're saying. I think this was before the era of like huge tourism and sort of like, I would say the package holiday era. This was when this was just sort of very much kicking off. And so families were going there and going, I'm going to set up a new life. It's going to be way cheaper than other places like Spain or France or Portugal. And they would see that as being their sort of, I don't know, their ticket to a really ideal retirement. I mean, you can understand why. It for me, right, I look at this place and I've done all this research and it looks paradise on earth.
If you were living off the land, so to speak, yeah, not suggesting they were, if you were, would you swap the land that you're living on, being UK land, for Greek land?
I think, to be honest with you, the promised land that I've seen, the pictures that I've seen, probably yes.
So some of the reports that I've read into this case, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, was that Eddie and Christine were actually living in a caravan in the UK at the time. And therefore, I mean, you almost sold me on moving somewhere myself, right? If you were in their situation at the time, I think maybe you could argue that it would have been possibly easier to reallocate than your average family that are tied down with specific jobs, mortgages to pay off, things like that. And that is exactly what they then did. But it wasn't actually as planned out as maybe we felt that it could have been initially. What I discovered through looking into the case was that apparently Christine's sister is reported to have treated the pair to a holiday to the island of Kos. And then when they went there, they fell in love with it immediately. I'm not sure if they had lots of money. Eddie was a builder, Christine ran a cafe. But in the UK, as I say, they did live on a campsite near Sheffield in a caravan. So I think that they probably felt that because of their environment, it would make it easier to just swap countries and go and live a better life. Who wouldn't want to do that? And the family joined them. Well, not all of the family. Initially, when they moved there, both their sons, Stephen and Danny, joined them. But their eldest child and only daughter, Kerry, wanted to stay in England. And this was because Kerry had a partner called Simon, and they had a son together called Ben Needham. Ben was about 1 year old at the time. Her and Simon had been dating for quite a while. They were actually engaged and they were living in a flat together. But the problem was Kerry definitely received support, as a lot of mothers do, from her family. Simon was out and he was what we call back in the day, and even sometimes now, the breadwinner of the family. And Kerry's role within the family unit was to stay at home and to look after Ben. And when I say stay at home, I just mean don't go to work, not actually stay at home all day, because she didn't. She spent a lot of time on the campsite in Sheffield with the rest of her family. And you can understand here that for Kerry, who was still a teenager at this time, she was an incredibly young mum, you can understand the amount of seclusion, isolation that she must have felt after the best part of most of her family did uproot and move away. Again, not being non-sympathetic here, because if I could, I would. And Kerry had the option to do so, but she was left in somewhat of a moral dilemma.
What was this moral dilemma?
Well, if you put yourself in Kerry and Simon's shoes, you've both got a child.
Yep.
You're sort of 50-50 in this together. One person's family moves away, one person's family stays there. How do you pick? Do you know what I mean? So it is a bit of a moral dilemma. At the same time, it depends what your values are like. Like normally, the way I look at things, I would normally always think, right, well, the mother decides, whatnot, she's raising the child. It's a very, very hard one. I think that Simon wasn't sold on the idea of moving to Greece initially.
I mean, you can understand that. He's a 21-year-old guy, can't you? And also, like, I suppose it also comes down to how involved the parents are. Like, if the parents are actively helping raise the kids, which it seems like Kerry's parents were, then obviously it makes sense to go and move. Because if they're the ones actually really helping, then it makes a complete difference, doesn't it?
I think the exact same. I do acknowledge the fact that we're sitting here as a couple of 30-year-olds, though. Do you know what I mean? Do you think it would be different, maybe?
Well, this is the thing. I remember hearing in this story that Simon was very much a homesick kind of guy. And he would very much like hate being away and that sort of thing. So, and I can completely sympathize with that, being a 21-year-old and going, do you know what? I really do miss home. Even on some of the best holidays you've ever been on in my entire life, I remember still thinking, God, I'm really excited to get home to do this or to see this person or whatever.
So to relocate,
you can imagine it. Yeah.
To find
your whole life.
To find
leave your family.
Friends because, but to leave your family behind. It's a huge thing to do at 21. And also at 20 odd, having a baby is a huge thing to do. I had a baby at 25, 26 years old and still didn't feel
By
ready
all
for it.
accounts, during the pregnancy, he was toing and froing about what he wanted to do, by the way, though. Just to caveat that. Like, by all accounts, he wasn't going to stay with Kerry the whole time.
Right.
They were very much off and on. So I think there was quite a strong chance that he wasn't involved in Ben's life, potentially.
Yeah, and one thing we knew for sure was Kerry was lonely. And that meant by April 1991, she had finally made her decision. She wanted to go to Kos and join up with the rest of her family, meaning her and Ben flew and then Simon followed shortly after. Now, Kerry quickly found work on the island of Kos. She actually worked at a local hotel. It was said that her mother reportedly was doing a bit of work at this hotel. That's how Kerry got the job. But once Kerry got the job, her mother didn't need to work at the hotel, and her mother, Christine, was then looking after Ben while Kerry went out and earned money. And it was important that she did because, as I say, this wasn't a massively wealthy family who had hit the jackpot and decided to relocate. This was a family that very much knew that they were going to have to get their hands dirty, so to speak. They were going to have to go out and
Graft.
whether it be trades, whether it be grafting in hotels, restaurants, bars, things like that, the money needs to come in. And it did. And therefore, Kerry and Simon were able to sort themselves a little flat in Kos. And young Ben Needham himself reportedly loved the change of environment. He was probably a little bit isolated himself without being old enough to really acknowledge or understand it. And the only real time that his mum Kerry had stated that he was getting attention was when she would take him down the park and things like that. Whereas now he was back amongst the family unit. And not only that, he was a little blonde kid out on the island of Kos in Greece. Listen, I've got a little son and a little daughter, and I know what a fuss would have been being made of Ben Needham around that time.
This is it. And look, being a blonde kid myself, I remember hearing stories from my family where literally people would try and pick me up and take me all types of different places when I was on holiday. This was the thing, like, again, being a young blonde kid when you go to, like, I remember going to Indonesia, for example, like they don't see a lot of young blonde kids.
You get tons of attention.
Yeah,
don't
you do.
Yeah. I remember it when I was on holiday when I was younger. I traveled through like Egypt and stuff like that. And as I say, it's uncommon and you get a lot of attention. Ben Needham would have been no different. Now, the men of the family at this time were actually all working on renovating a farmhouse. I believe that once it was done, the family were going to live inside of there. And Simon was helping to an extent, but at the same time, Simon needed to bring in money. He was getting a little bit of work on the island, but once that job actually got finished, the work completely dried up. The money kind of dried up for Simon. Kerry was earning a little bit, but Simon was struggling. And one thing that he was definitely struggling with was that feeling of being homesick, of not having his family and his friends there. And that meant that eventually, after just a couple of months, Simon made the decision to leave the island of Kos. And I've seen a couple of channels cover this case, and I don't know whether the representation of Simon has always been the fairest. Again, this is just my perception, isn't it? So my opinion against someone else's may not mean all that much. But where I feel that Simon has been misrepresented in this story at times is almost as if he had just left the family there and he was going back to England to live his life, which isn't really what I have read from looking into the case. I could be proven wrong here, but what I have gathered was that Simon was going back to England to find accommodation again, to pick up work where he knew that it would be much, much easier to find it. He had a lot of connections. And then Kerry and Ben were reportedly going to join Simon back in England. They are the reports that I found. Whether the intentions were different, I'm just giving you what I I have found on the situation. And it's also important, in my opinion, to not feel like Simon has fallen at the first hurdle here. It's reported that there were multiple occasions that his parents had actually wired him out money. So I think it's quite important at a time to put yourself in Simon's shoes here. You don't want to keep borrowing money off your parents. You don't want to, be... I think there's a element of like pride that comes into it as well, isn't there? If your missus is out, she's being the breadwinner, you're kind of sat there feeling like a spare tool at times, aren't you?
Yeah, but you also want to be comfortable, don't you, as well? Like, again, mentally, if your mental health isn't there, you're struggling to get by, you're struggling to make money, but also you're missing home, you're missing your friends, you're missing your family, you're missing your daily routine of being in your usual sort of setup. You could completely understand why he might want to take his family and go, do you know what? We've tried this experiment. We've tried living in Cos. We've tried living with your family. It's something that I don't feel comfortable with. I want to go back home. I want to start earning cash. I want to feel like I'm the breadwinner. And also, you might potentially be able to get a job there as well. And we all have a happy family in England where we all feel a bit more settled. Yeah. That's completely fine.
I think that's great context you've given it there to actually acknowledge the fact that he's gone there. He's tried. He's done it. And he's feeling lonely. He's feeling a bit lost there. He's feeling like he doesn't fit in there. And eventually he flies home. And one of the sort of tragic parts about this is when you come to learn the time frame in which he flew home, any father would be riddled with guilt, frustration, anger every single time they reflect upon that time frame. But again, none of us have a crystal ball here. None of us can see into the future, and no one knew what was about to happen in Cos. And that then brings us to just days after Ben's dad, Simon, had flown back to the UK. Kerry is working at the hotel still, and Kerry's mum, Christine, is looking after Ben. This is the 24th of July, 1991.
Right, before we get into that, I know that so many of you true crime fans are incredibly concerned about the way that the online world is going. And if you are worried about keeping yourself safe online, there's only one thing to check out, and it's a VPN. And the only one that we have ever used and even ever thought about is Surfshark. And the reason why we always trust Surfshark is because more and more websites and services are asking you to put in your personal details, to give so much away, and they're very, very unsafe, and they require third parties to exchange your data, and quite frankly, I don't think they should. I've seen it recently when even logging into Xbox to play a video game, you now have to put your ID in there. And the good news is, if you're a PC gamer, whether you're watching stuff online, using your tablet, even using your phone, the way to be safe is using a VPN. And getting Surfshark is as cheap as a price of a cup of coffee every single month. And so you'll be in good company if you pick it up, because a lot of you have already done so, and we've seen so many comments. And if you click the link in the description, you'll get an extra 4 months of Surfshark when you buy an annual plan. Remember, the link is very simply surfshark.com/Joey and Josh. And if you use code Joey and Josh, you will get that amazing offer. And I say we used it on things like Netflix when we're researching these cases. For example, when we covered the Amy Bradley case, we were able to watch that documentary early on American Netflix when we would never be able to watch it in the UK. And that massively helped us when prepping that case. And Surfshark is available on tons of devices, including a Chrome extension on PC, to tablet apps, phone apps, and loads more. And getting it to work is incredibly easy. It is as simple as a click of a button and you will be sent to another country and able to browse safely from there. So remember that link, Surfshark/Joey and Josh, and code Joey and Josh for that amazing 4 months extra offer when you buy an annual plan. Thank you so much to Surfshark for sponsoring this episode. Now let's get back into it. Yeah, so this day began much like any other day in Cos. As Joey said, Kerry drops Ben off at the family caravan, which is in a place called Paradisi. And then Eddie and Christine were going to look after Ben for that day. Kerry then leaves to go and work at the hotel, and she arrives for her shift at 11:30 a.m. And at around midday, Christine, Ben's grandmother, decided that she wanted to take a walk up to the farmhouse to go and see the rest of the family, but also to have a spot of lunch as well. So what she does, she packs Ben up, gets him in a pram, and starts making the 20-minute walk from their caravan to the farmhouse. There, both Eddie, Ben's grandfather, and also Stephen, his uncle, were working on that house, and they were going to all meet up and, as I say, have that spot of lunch. At this time, Ben was only 21 months old. And so he brings a couple of toys with him in that pram. There are a couple of little cars that he wanted to play with when he got there. And they started on that journey and they actually make it very quickly to the farmhouse. So the family get there. And as you can imagine, it is a sweltering hot day in the middle of summer in Kos. And so Ben, being the little, cheeky kid that he is, finds a pot of water, covers himself all in it. And basically he gets all of his trousers completely wet. So he has to strip off, take those trousers off. And then he's basically just walking around in a top and his nappy for the rest of the day. What his grandmother does is hang those shorts up on a branch very close to the outside of the farmhouse. In fact, so close that she could almost see it from where they're having their lunch. And at around 2:30 that afternoon, Eddie, Christine, Stephen, and Danny, along with their property owner, Michaelis Kiripos, sat down in the farmhouse for lunch. Ben was running around in the terrace outside, and then he was also running into the building itself. He was messing around with a stick and some of his toy cars. They say he was just 12 feet away from the family when they were sat having that lunch. Soon after they finish the food, Stephen leaves the farmhouse, gets on his moped and decides that he wants to go back to Kerry's flat to have a shower and then to go and pick up some food after that. Little Ben sees Stephen about to go and he realises that he's getting on his moped. Ben absolutely loved this moped and, as you can imagine, was very often ride on it with Stephen. And so he begs Stephen, he says to him, please, can you take me with you? And Stephen says, absolutely no chance. Go and play with your granddad. I will be back soon, but you're not coming with me. And right after this, two very significant things happened. Dino Barkas was a digger driver and construction worker, and he was operating his large JCB digger, clearing earth for a new house just 50 yards down the road from the farmhouse. And secondly, there was also some other builders working on a nearby property, and they noticed that there was a white car believed to be a Suzuki Alto parked on the lane. They say in that car, they saw two men in the front and a woman on the back seat. And all the while this is happening, the family are just having their lunch. They expect Ben to just be potting around, playing, and that's because they've just left him to it. But after a while, Christine notices that she hasn't heard from Ben. And so she gets up and starts to look for him. She gets onto the terrace and noticed that not only was Ben not there, his toy cars and his shorts that were previously hanging from that tree had also vanished. And at first, there was not an immediate panic, which surprised me. But what the family said is that they just expected Ben to be around the property. They expected to just have a quick look for him and be able to find him straight away. Or the secondary theory is that they thought that he would have gone off with Stephen. He obviously loved that moped. They all knew that he loved that moped. And so they thought he might have just been off with him. So there wasn't an immediate, intense panic from the family.
Have you ever lost like a family member or anyone that you were supposed to be looking at?
Interestingly, Joey, I have been the lost family member. So potentially from the other side.
Yep.
I was on a holiday in Gran Canaria. I was out playing with a friend in the courtyard of a bar. My parents were through a glass door and I could see them.
Tapas, were they?
They were having a beautiful tapas meal, actually, right? It tells you everything you need to know. And I was having a great time. I could see my parents. I was often banging on the window, trying to get their attention. They couldn't see me. It was probably loud in the bar. They probably couldn't see me through the glass either.
Didn't really like you.
Didn't really like me that much. But basically, long story short, they called the police. They got everyone involved. And then I basically knew where I was the whole time. I could see them. I wasn't worried at all, but they were incredibly worried. But I ended up being found very quickly.
Well, there you go. I had a moment. I didn't lose my daughter. She was with her mother.
Yeah.
I didn't realise that her mother was looking after her at the time. And I thought that I was supposed to have my eye on her type thing. Very close to Gran Canaria, Tenerife, of course. Yeah. Turn round and she's not there. And the fear that set through me was unbelievable. And the 15 seconds until I spotted her with her mother were like, it felt like 15 minutes, like unbelievable fear, right? Now, the reason I bring this up is I think that this is, listen, person by person, I think case by case, it'd be different, but I think this is something, and it's contextually relevant when you talk about the time period. That fear of your child going missing, in my opinion, became the vast majority of people in terms of who would have that sort of fear and who would have a similar experience to me after 1993. And the context there is a case that we've covered on the channel before, and that is the tragic murder of James Bulger, right? And in 1993, when Jamie Bulger obviously went missing and was tragically murdered, things like, you know, the harnesses that people used to have their kids on, they were like leads, like dog leads for kids type thing. Those harnesses, the sale prices in those skyrocketed. Basically, sort of fear of, you know, it's not being safe to take your eyes off your children. That sort of pandemonium fear really hit in around that time.
But I have to say,
this contextually was a few years before that, by the way.
Yeah. But also what I would say is, even when we were growing up in the late 90s and early 2000s, I remember my family being very happy for me to go and walk to my mate's house or, you know, walk around when we were on a holiday. Like, it was a very different time, very relaxed, even with the context that you've just said.
Nowhere near as young as Ben Needham, for example. But yeah, if I was on holiday in like a Gran Canaria or somewhere like that, say we're talking 1998, 1999 sort of time, when I'm 4 or 5 years old, would it be uncommon for me to go off for a few hours even on my own, a couple of hours with kids I've met around the pool, stuff like that? It wouldn't, mate. It actually wouldn't. So again, I'm not trying to rewrite history. I'm trying to give you my experiences of how I remember it being as a child, in terms of the freedom you would have and maybe what we would perceive as lack of freedom, maybe rightly so nowadays.
But as Joey says, the panic started slowly getting more and more intense. The family started searching the property, and the property was about the size of 15 football fields. So it wasn't like it was a small plot of land. And trying to go through 15 football fields with various other outbuilding structures, you know, olive groves, riverbeds, that sort of thing, which they all started searching, is not a quick thing to do. It takes a pretty serious amount of time to go and do that. And the thing is that even though they did all of this searching, they combed all of that area of land, they still weren't able to find Ben. It starts to get nearly dark. And at this point, the family start hearing some very strange noises. They run to the fields in which they think they hear these noises, and they think it was Ben shouting out and crying for help. But unfortunately for them, it wasn't Ben. It was just some farm animals making some weird noises. And again, they still didn't know where he was. Now, a key thing to point out at this point is that the family had not informed Kerry, Ben's mother, that he was missing. And that's because they didn't want to needlessly concern Kerry, because they thought that Ben would just turn up and be safe and they'd all laugh about it afterwards. But that is not what happened at all. Eddie gets into his Land Rover at around 7:30 p.m. and drives towards Kerry's apartment because he thinks that Ben might have been with Stephen, and hopes and prays that they're together. The problem is that they're not. Stephen was taking a shower at the time, and when Eddie walks in, he says to him, "What was going on? Is Ben with you?" And Stephen says, "No, he's never been with me. The last time I saw him was at the farmhouse, and I thought he was with you guys, and I have no clue where he is."
Yeah, and I spoke there about the fact that it probably wasn't uncommon for kids to go off on their own and stuff like that. But that detail in terms of the amount of time, precious time that was lost in basically kind of just gambling on the fact that he would be with someone else, that'll be something that I think the family find it difficult to deal with when they reflect on it.
And this is the thing is, again, I can't quite comprehend how clear this different era was. We've talked about it already, like lack of CCTV, you know, police reports are different in this time, but also communication was very clearly different. Like, for example, right now, if that happens, Stephen goes back to the flat, takes a shower. What happens straight away is that Eddie picks up the mobile phone, gives him a call and goes, "Is this kid with you? Yes or no?" And you get an answer pretty much immediately. Whereas in this time, it was a lot more, you know, you hope people turn up, you know, people have gone for a walkabout, you know, it's one of those things. But again, I just want to make this really, really clear. He's 21 months old. This isn't like a 10-year-old kid that could have gone off and met a new friend. Yeah. This is a very, very young child.
100%. I'm not normalizing it at all. I think that obviously when I spoke about the times when we're talking about ourselves going off on holiday, a lot older than
way older. So they start getting very concerned and they call the police. And the police initially, and again, there are some parallels here to the Madeleine McCann investigation, they don't take it as seriously as I feel that some police in the UK may have. Potentially think that's, jumping a big leap, but potentially didn't take it as seriously. And they also focus their attention on the family themselves. And they also spent a lot of time trying to find him with Stephen, which Stephen had very clearly said, he has not been with me. I did not take him on the moped. So again, if we're talking about wasted time, there was immediately wasted time, even when the police were involved, let alone when the family wasted time.
But do you know why they had a bit of a fixation on Stephen's moped?
No, I don't. What was that?
There was a dent in the moped, like in the front of the moped, right? Apparently a very visible dent, right? So all the time, while the focus should be on finding Ben, letting the airports and the borders know that there's potentially a child who could have been abducted, missing, something like that, which I would say, you've always got to look at the family, understand that. I'm not going to, I won't here sit and bash the police for looking at the family, because I would do the same.
Yeah.
However,
you have to, legally.
However, there is a precious amount of time. You're at a scene, which is what? It's not a crime scene. It's not a crime scene. There's no crime. There's no blood. There's no nothing. There's no sign of a struggle, sighting of someone taking someone or anything like that. And therefore, the amount of precious time that it took, not just this one thing, but there was a few little hiccups like this, such as Stephen being able to prove that dent was already in his bike. That would have hindered the investigation and the search massively, in my opinion.
It's so annoying. And again, this is the thing with these cases. You know that the first few hours are incredibly important. And again, much like the other cases that we focus on in this channel, police wasted so much more time. And by 10 p.m, Kerry is finishing up her shift and she goes to the hotel bar to basically unwind after a day's work. She still doesn't know that her son is missing. That's until someone beckons her over and desperately tries to get her to come to the front and the reception of the hotel. And that's where the police are waiting with her mother, Christine. Christine is there, hysterically crying. She almost can't even get the words out. And all she can say is that Ben is gone and that we need to find him. Kerry immediately sets off from the hotel, returns to the apartment, returns to the farmhouse, and tries to start searching for her son. And all the while, as Joey was saying, the family were begging the police to shut down the island. They were saying that no one can get in or out, stop the ferries, at least let us search the cars to make sure that Ben is not there. And a police officer promised them that they would do that. He said, come with me at 3 a.m. the next morning. There's a ferry that's going off to Athens, the mainland of Greece, and we will search all of the vehicles to make sure that Ben isn't there. So what do? The family go there. They're waiting at 3 a.m. The police officer that promised that they were going to be there did not show up. And so the boarding procedure, the usual ferry activity went off and none of the vehicles were searched. And indeed, it would be 3 whole days until the ferry ports and the airports were shut down while people were searching for Ben.
They weren't shut though. It wasn't shut down. When you say shut down, you just mean officially notified.
Notified, told about it 3 days after.
Told about
Disgrace.
Yeah.
And the fact is that even after all of these initial searches, full 24 hours, what was clear is that no one had any idea where Ben was. And there weren't really many leads at this point.
There weren't many leads, according to the police, and in line with the investigation. But as I just said there, Josh, the airports, the docks, they weren't notified. So it would look awful now if there were potential sightings of Ben inside the airport, wouldn't it?
You're telling me there were potential sightings, Joey?
Let's get into the sightings, why don't we? And although nothing ever came of it, this really is a shocking detail from the case, in my opinion, because there was a woman who worked in a kiosk inside of the airport on the island, right? Once the airports become aware of the news, I don't know whether that's because they've been made aware or because now it's made it into the news and therefore they are just aware. I couldn't tell you, but one thing I can tell you is a woman who worked in a kiosk inside the airport rung up the police and she said that she saw a young boy, which she believed could have been Ben and definitely matched his description inside of the airport just days after Ben had vanished. And she noted that this young lad was with another young boy who he didn't seem to resemble. And one of the reasons why I feel that this theory could hold a tiny, small little bit of weight is the fact that there was also a local shopkeeper who reported seeing Ben on the day that he went missing. And he was a lot more adamant that who he had seen may have been Ben Needham. Now, once again, this shopkeeper reported seeing the young lad, who he rung up because he suspected could have been Ben, with an older boy that didn't really look much like the young boy that he was with. The police say that both leads were investigated, but no one was ever identified. Now, Josh, didn't you mention 2 men in a car?
White car, Suzuki, apparently. 2 men in the front seat, 1 woman in the back seat. Yeah.
Okay, so those 3 people, why have they never come forward? What do they not know that they were at the scene of a major investigation?
I'm sure they know because it was everywhere, wasn't it?
And speaking of everywhere, right, the actual scene that Ben went missing from, would it be the sort of place, in your opinion, that people would just be... I mean, it's not a cruise spot, is it? It's not the sort of place that you would just be chilling in a car. Probably not in that sort of heat either.
Is it a closed off road like this? It's not a through road at all. Like, you basically have to drive up and you can't go anywhere else, basically.
That's what I believe. Yeah, that's what I've been led to believe.
So it's not one of those things where you drive up and you go, oh, I'm actually going to somewhere else. You've got to go there, know exactly where you're going, and basically stay there if you're going to be there. That's the thing.
Well, being that it was basically a building site, I would assume so, mate, yeah. And then in 1994, the first major breakthrough happened. Something that would have sent the pulses of the Needham family through the roof when they received this news. And that was that 17 separate calls had come in that all identified a young lad on the island of Corfu as being a potential fit for the missing child, Ben Needham. These phone calls all had a very similar theme to them. The people had seen and in some cases interacted with a young lad. And this young lad spoke English. He matched Ben's description and he always seemed to be alone. Now, Josh, do you believe that in some cases there is smoke without fire?
I mean, sometimes, yes, but very rarely.
17 separate calls? Would you say there's smoke without fire?
I think 17 separate calls is incredibly interesting. I feel that that's something that isn't really a coincidence.
Well, it is reported that every single one of those calls was processed, investigated, and the Corfu leads were very much investigated, but very much went nowhere. And not only the British public, some reports would even claim that the Needhams themselves weren't given the full disclosure and descriptions from these investigations, which is really concerning, isn't it? What I find very, very hard to believe is that 17 people all just saw the same thing that didn't happen. Here's what I don't find hard to believe, by the way. I do not find it hard to believe that 17 people could have all seen one boy and mistakenly took that boy for Ben Needham. I don't find that hard to believe because when it's in the height of the media, if there was a kid, for example, that does stick out from his parents, he's blonde and his parents aren't. Very possible thing that can happen genetically quite easily.
But also, we've seen this in loads of different cases as well, like the Amy Bradley case. I mean, there's so many different examples of stories that we've covered on this channel where people see people that look very similar. And this is the thing, like there's so many people out there that look similar to you, but when you get up close and you really look at them, you go, oh, actually, they don't look anything like that.
So what about in the Madeleine McCann case? Do you not remember that woman that had the baby cradled on her back, or the child, and she was holding the child on her back? She had been pictured. The pictures were a bit blurry, pixelated. A lot of people thought that child was going to be Madeleine McCann. Yeah. They went there, they investigated. They ended up actually doing a photo shoot, or at least having a photograph taken of that child. It wasn't Madeleine McCann. It was legit. It was that woman's daughter, I believe. She had a different skin complexion. So I don't find it difficult to believe that 17 separate people could have mistook a young blonde boy for Ben. But very much so, like we got in the case where they felt the girl was Madeleine McCann, we then got a picture of it and we got a bit of closure on it and we're able to move on and investigate into other areas. And this was never done. And what I'm about to tell you is going to make it seem even more strange, because there was said to be a woman named Maria who lived in Corfu who had a unique involvement in this case. According to her, there's no involvement in the case, but several separate parties have all implicated Maria in the disappearance of Ben Needham, or at least they've connected Maria with a young blonde boy who seems to have now vanished. 3 Greek nationals had a similar story in which they saw Maria carrying a young blonde boy on a beach in Corfu who at the time seemed distressed. In total, 5 more Brits who visited Corfu all reported not just seeing a young blonde boy, but seeing him with Maria. Additionally, someone from a local campsite reported Maria bringing a young blonde boy back to the campsite at that time that spoke English. And there are allegations, rather than actual confirmed reports to the police, that Maria apparently told someone that she raised that boy and that he no longer speaks English, he now speaks Greek. And eventually, Maria was tracked down. She was a grandmother by this point. She was living in Corfu, but she denied having any involvement. She denied ever having any interactions, ever looking after a young blonde boy. So all of those people, completely unconnected, Josh, they must have all just got it wrong when they kind of implicated Maria in at least, if not Ben Needham, being with a young blonde boy.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense, that, does it?
It doesn't really. It says to me that maybe Maria has something to hide, something that might not be related to the Ben Needham investigation and may well not even be related to anything criminal. But I do think there was a real lack of insight given to both the public and, from reports that I've read, the Needham family themselves on this Maria character. And over the years, there were so many sightings, so many false leads, people coming forward and investigations into people that I would say the public weren't really kept in the loop with. In 1995, a blonde boy, approximately 6 years old, is found living with a gypsy family in a camp in Greece. DNA tests later confirm that it is not Ben. In 1999, a man spots a fair-haired boy, roughly 10 years old, on a beach in Rhodes. He is convinced that this boy is Ben Needham, and I can't find out how, but somehow he manages to get a hair sample of this lad. He sends it off, they test it, they run the DNA on it, and once again, it's not Ben Needham. There are multiple other sightings, probably just way too many for us to read out right now before we get into the people that have come forwards. But I'm going to give my personal opinion on it. Out of any sightings, if we were going to run with the theory that Ben Needham is still alive, Maria at this point is suspect number 1 for me. And this is where we jump forward to the era of men coming forward believing that they themselves are Ben Needham. Because to the current day, over 40 different men have had their DNA tested to see whether or not they are Ben Needham. For example, right, in the year 2024, 3 separate men alone in Denmark were all apparently tested to see if they were Ben Needham. One of these men came forward himself and he was adamant that he was Ben. He even claimed to have had memories, but the DNA test came back and it wasn't a match. There was also a body found in Germany and it was in a river, and this body was said to have been a visible match for the photo-enhanced progression pictures of how Ben Needham may look at that age. The body of the man that was found in this river was said to have been around the same age, and before they could find out how he died, what they were able to find out was that he wasn't of German descent. And they were able to find out he was of European descent and likely had English in him. The DNA eventually was run. Once again, this was not Ben Needham. And as of today, I do have some news for you. Josh, were you braced for this? Do you know anything?
Are you going to tell me some breaking news that I don't know?
Well, I mean, it's breaking, but it's only breaking to the point that about 40 others have broken and nothing's come of it. So don't get your hopes up. But there's a man right now currently going through the process to see if he is Ben Needham. Did you know this?
I didn't know this. So what's going on? Are they DNA testing this guy?
Yeah, so this guy's basically in limbo out in America at the moment. This guy is from the United States. He has no birth certificate. He knows that he was adopted in 1993, just years after Ben went missing. And his adopted parents became very, very defensive when he asked for his birth certificate. This is all allegedly, apparently. The man apparently bears a striking resemblance to age progression images of how Ben Needham may well look today. And not only that, he too has claimed to have some memories. Unlike the other man that came forward, they aren't specifically saying, I remember being Ben Needham, but he's got a lot of unexplained memories. And the one thing that this man is alleged to be claiming at the moment, Josh, are very similar birthmarks to those of Ben Needham. The man's been tested, and Kerry Needham and everyone else are still awaiting the results. They have obviously mentioned the fact that they're optimistic, but they've just been here so many times.
This is the thing, you've really got to feel for Kerry Needham. You really have, because she's been through so many of these claims and these people saying that they're Ben. And you can imagine every time her hopes, really get up, and she gets very excited about potentially seeing, her young son, who's now an adult.
Well, it's a really difficult topic of conversation. I mean, what would you rather, in a way, to not have the hope or to have the hope? And the reason I say that is because we have covered missing people cases, missing children cases as well. And I've often found that hope is something that can often drive parents on.
Yeah.
And I've seen other cases in which parents have lost hope and their actual health and their conditions deteriorated,
Yeah.
The mother of Amanda Berry in America died from natural causes while her daughter was in captivity. And a lot of people say, look, those natural causes can be translated to a broken heart, basically. Do you know what I mean? We've also seen something very similar with the health, unfortunately, of Luke Mitchell's mum, whilst he's been in prison for a crime that many people believe that he didn't do. And what I'm saying is the hope is something that I feel once it's taken away can have a real detrimental effect on some of these families. And the reason why I believe that this is quite significant is because the Greek authorities have somewhat come up with a theory of what happened on that day. And I'm not suggesting that they don't have any evidence to back this theory up, but the theory is very, very similar to one that the Portuguese authorities came up with around the Madeleine McCann case once upon a time.
Yep.
A theory that was eventually disproven, but very, very similar. So why don't you tell me a little bit about the Greek theory, Josh?
Well, it's interesting you refer to it as the Greek theory, because I refer to it as the South Yorkshire police theory. So
is it South Yorkshire Police?
It's the South Yorkshire Police's belief of what happened. So just to give some context around this, right? The Greek authorities do their investigation, and basically the Needham family feel that they weren't being represented and they weren't finding information in the right way, basically. And so what they do is they go back home. They go back to the British authorities, and the British authorities say that they're going to conduct the case and start going through the evidence. Now, obviously, all that the British police can do is take source information, listen to witnesses, and then what they hope to do is pass that information off into Greek authorities and to various other jurisdictions, and hope that the police there do their jobs in following up that case. So, what actually is the theory? Well, it all relates to a person that I've mentioned earlier on in this podcast, and his name is Dino Barkas. And as I said, he was working with his JCB near to the farmhouse at the exact time that Ben goes missing. And the South Yorkshire Police have said it is their professional belief that Ben was crushed to death via Dino's heavy machinery and that his body was subsequently hidden. And as you can imagine, and as I would say you would hope, you expect the police to be able to back that information up with a significant amount of evidence. That is a huge claim, not only to say that Dino murdered Ben, but also that he then hid the body. So why don't I tell you a little bit about Dino first, and then I will explain the evidence that the police have against him. So Dino Barkas was a wealthy and successful businessman who was highly connected within the Kos community. And on the day that Ben vanished, as we said, he was operating that JCB. He was only 50 yards down the lane from where Ben was playing. Dino actually passed away from stomach cancer in 2015 at the age of 62.
Convenient. Oh, it is convenient.
Yes, and this theory actually gained momentum just after in 2016.
Just after he passed away?
Just after he passed away, Joey.
Right, okay.
So as you can see, Joey's already putting 2 and 2 together, and he's already very much unsure of this theory.
I'm putting,
hiding
2 and 2 together and getting a tabloid paycheck is what I'm getting, but there you go. I don't know.
And this is because a friend that apparently was very close with Dino claimed various different witness statements, which I will go into right now.
Before we go into it, can I tell you something?
Yes.
If you're hard up for cash,
yes,
right, make what you want up about me on my deathbed.
Okay. Thanks very much.
And just say it as a confession.
Just so we know that's on camera now, so I can actually do that.
Yeah, you literally can do it. You say whatever you want.
So, and do you know what? The sad thing is I wouldn't even be making a lot of it up.
Your imagination would probably make tamer things up than what I'm actually guilty of.
It's actually a bit of a shame, really. So the witness said that he saw Dino sweating and shaking the day after Ben had vanished. The witness then asked him, could there have been an accident with Ben? And allegedly, Dino replies back to him and says, I don't know, but it is possible. And apparently, this witness also said that Dino heard a yelp when he was driving his JCB, and he thought that he might have just crushed an animal. But apparently, the witness thinks that may have actually been Ben Needham. And then finally, it's been very loosely reported by some very unreputable newspaper outlets that apparently this witness had a deathbed confession from Dino where he basically said, yes, I killed Ben, and yes, I hid the body. But how much weight we put to this evidence and this witness statement, which we very much cannot corroborate, I would say we're not going to put that much weight into it.
Personally, just off hearing that, no evidence, no, like I'm not on about physical proof, evidence, things like that. Just no evidence whatsoever that the guy ever even said that. Now, what I would do is if I had done something, I wouldn't let it affect me. I wouldn't let the cracks appear. No one around me would suspect anything. And then just, on the deathbed, I just said, I just think it's so unrealistic, mate. Again, listen, I could be completely wrong. Like, this is the beauty of this channel. One day, maybe it'll come back, make me look like an idiot. But sorry, mate, I'm not buying this deathbed confession.
So what about if I told you that there was some actual evidence then? Would that help you?
That would strengthen things, yeah.
Okay, so South Yorkshire Police launched an investigation and they called it Operation Ben. Not very imaginative, but gets the job done. This started off in September of 2016, and this investigation was to go back to the Farmhouse site and to dig up a huge amount of land to be able to find if there was any evidence at all for this theory. And the news was that they did actually find some evidence. They didn't find Ben. They didn't find his remains. But what they did find was one very key thing when they were there. They found one of the toys that the family, the Needham family, said was Ben's toy. So what we should clarify at this point is that it wasn't just a farmhouse site, but there was also a secondary site which they investigated, which was a known location where Dino would actually go and dump the various different building waste services that he would effectively go and do. And all in all, they actually excavated over 800 tons of rubble. So you might say now that this cements the police theory. Obviously, there was an item from Ben's found buried underground, and so this could be where Ben might have been. And the police have some evidence for that, Joey. Professor Lorna Dawson in 2017, a leading soil scientist, tested the items and found that the chemical profile indicated that there was human blood decomposition on both the toy car and also a sandal that was found at the scene. So in 2018, Joey, they then did some DNA evidence and some DNA sampling on that blood evidence. And obviously, if this is the prevailing theory of the South Yorkshire Police and they operate purely on evidence, you would obviously say that the DNA proven on that article and those articles would be from Ben.
Well,
is that correct?
Who else can it be from?
Exactly. Unfortunately, it was inconclusive and it wasn't found to be Ben's DNA at all.
Well, inconclusive, I would say is a little bit of miswording there. No, it wasn't found to be Ben's. It was ruled out because inconclusive could suggest there was a chance that it was Ben's. It wasn't. It was ruled out of being Ben's. And in terms of the admission from the family that the toy car was Ben's, they said they were 90% sure. And actually, that 90% came a lot from Ben's grandmother, who was looking after him that day. We've discussed on the podcast before, it's kind of wishful thinking. And we spoke about where we've been in certain scenarios where you're so desperate to get an answer that you do jump to a conclusion straight away and stuff like that. I just do think that that's a very distinct possibility here. They found a car and yes, it could have belonged to Ben, but also off the top of my head, you're not even Ben Needham's age. How many of those cars did you have?
Yeah, thousands probably.
I had fucking loads.
Loads.
I had loads of them.
Over the years.
And I tell you one thing, I guarantee you now, many, many kids that travelled to the island of Kos in the year 1991 had those toy cars.
Arguably, the kids in Kos probably had some of those cars. They wouldn't have even need to ship them in, as in from a tourist. They could have just been from kids on the island. And then you had Detective Inspector John Cousins state at the close of the dig, this is a police officer for the South Yorkshire Police, that he felt that this evidence was irrefutable and that he thought this was the location that Ben Needham's body was placed.
Irrefutable?
Irrefutable.
Mate, that is the biggest load of shit that I've ever actually heard. And I hate to sound, look, I don't mean to sound insensitive about this case, but I just fucking hate it when such a sloppy job is done on stuff. Irrefutable. It's very much refutable. It's very much refutable. Do you know why? Because no fucking DNA evidence was even found on it that it was Ben's. Doesn't make it irrefutable.
Well, the good news
I would say that the evidence that I gave you is probably more irrefutable than that toy car being found.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that Dino's widow, who's called Vivaria, and also his son, called Volantis, have vehemently denied any involvement by Dino in this case. They say that he was a very good man, an upstanding citizen that would have had nothing to do with this crime. And if he did, he would have come clean and said that he actually did. And it wasn't just that. They also said that an officer from the South Yorkshire Police came to their house and personally apologised for all of the harassment that they got around the case, which doesn't really make sense if they feel that Dino was the prime suspect in a murder case.
I doubt any police forces are going to be visiting Christian Bruckner anytime soon and apologising, are they?
No. I don't think that's going to be the case at all. And I'm glad you mentioned that as well, by the way, because there was a lot of people accusing and saying witness statements about Christian Bruckner, which we have no way to refute. And again, it reminded me of this case about some of the statements that the witness actually made, because there's no way of knowing that they were true. We don't even know who this witness actually was, Joey.
Can I tell you one of the things that jumps out at me straight away here with the digger theory?
Yeah.
We've covered the disappearance of Madeleine McCann on multiple bases. And around 2011, I believe it was, they implicated a former waiter from the hotel who was known to be a bit of a thief. And ultimately, the story was that by this point, he was working as a tractor driver and they believed that he ran Madeleine McCann over in his tractor. Again, the cases are 15, 16 years apart or whatever, but fuck me, it's very similar of a theory under similar circumstances and similar contexts in terms of what would the island of Kos love?
Gone.
They'd love closure.
On it.
They'd love closure.
They'd love to stop
as would Pride to Lose, in my opinion.
Yeah, this is the thing. I think also, by the way, South Yorkshire Police very much want closure on it because they want to stop investigating it and they don't want to be under pressure to actually find the answer. So it would make sense for all of the authorities together to want to close this case. And also what I will say is it doesn't really make sense in either examples that you've just used there that a panicked tractor driver would have the nous and the ability to both murder someone and then cover up, hide the body in a very sophisticated way, not to leave any any trace evidence or any DNA at all around the crime scene and then be able to move on. And the other point that I will say is, the one thing that we haven't really mentioned up to now is that not only was Ben missing himself, but also his clothes that were hanging up on the branch very close to where the family was sitting down and having lunch were also disappearing. So let me just set the example of the scene that you have to say here. Dino was there. He ran Ben over in a JCB. He then basically panicked, had to then hide the body, picked up his clothes, which were very close to the family, who could have alerted them. There was also a dog, by the way, very close to them. So he would have had to walk past that dog, who would have inherently barked, because that's what they do in all of these situations, alerted the family, and then they perhaps would not have left Ben out by himself for as long, because they would have heard a dog barking, something would have happened. Even just logically of playing this out play by play, it doesn't quite make sense.
And also, the deathbed confession, Dino heard something. He thought it might have been an animal or something like that. But Dino was in the earshot to hear it, and Ben's family won. That's another assumption you'd have to make there, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And also, Kerry then went back and she went through the timeline of the day. And obviously, we've said that Ben goes missing around 2:30-ish. Like, let's just say that. Apparently, Dino wasn't even on site until 4:30, 5 o'clock. So again, it doesn't even really make sense from a timeline perspective either.
Well, it doesn't make any sense to me, to be honest. And I also do trust a mother's instinct a lot of the time. And I don't think Kerry Needham believes that he's responsible. Or
No.
that is what happened.
Well, the fact of the matter is, Kerry believes that this is still a missing person case. And I think this is where we've now got to go on to where we chat about what actually happened. Because what I will say, and before I say this, huge sympathies goes out to Kerry, because I can imagine that her life now is so difficult. Waking up in the morning must be incredibly hard. Trying to go about her daily life must be honestly an ordeal. But what I will say is that in these situations, the families of missing people very often want their victims to be alive, because you want someone to be alive. You want to be able to find them one day. And so what a lot of these families do is they jump to the conclusion that the victim is still alive. And obviously, without any evidence either way, we don't know at the moment, do we? So I think at the moment, she's trying her best to find out what happened to Ben. And she's doing that from a perspective of a missing person case rather than a murder.
I would say that Kerry, and I'm not suggesting that you don't believe this, but I would say that Kerry Needham is very much, I don't want to say within her right, of course she's within her right. I think she's doing the right thing.
Oh, 100%.
By treating it as a missing person's case. Because we've covered so many, like, I've got a fascination with missing people, to be completely
Also, by the way, I
honest.
don't want to be cynical about this, but unfortunately in true crime cases, you often do. Police tend to put a lot less resources into murder cases than they do to missing people cases.
Yeah.
And I mean that seriously. Like, basically, if there's closure, if the South Yorkshire police have said this case is over, case closed, we've got the evidence to know, we feel that he's been murdered, they're not going to put as many resources, money, time, detectives into finding someone, because they feel that they've got the answer to the case. Whereas if this is an ongoing thing, Ben's still out there, it's going to take a lot more resources, a lot more time, a lot more energy. And we know that more often than not, the police don't want to do that.
No, they don't, unless it's called Operation Grange, for example.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I've got the stats on how much money was actually spent on finding this case in comparison to the Madeleine McCann case.
I'd be very interested
Would you like
to know, because I would imagine that the Madeleine McCann investigation completely dwarfs the Ben Needham investigation, but maybe you're about to prove me wrong here.
Well, this is the thing. We did the research on this, and I think all in all, based on all of the public funding, but also the taxpayer money and everything like that, I think the Madeleine McCann case is near enough £20 million now. The Ben Needham case has raised £3.2 million. And bearing in mind, he went missing how many
16 years or so before? 91 to 2007, yes.
It's a significantly less amount of money. And what I will say is poor old Kelly actually had to use the Madeleine McCann investigation to raise awareness of her own missing person case in Ben. And what we mean by that is, obviously, the Madeleine McCann case was huge news. Worldwide newspaper, TV news, 24-hour news, podcasts, everything you can possibly imagine. There was sort of cases, people talking about Madeleine McCann. Whereas what happened with Ben Needham was very different to that. Like, we saw a small bit of awareness at the time. We saw obviously a public case. There was money being raised to find him. But after that, Kelly really had to go to bat every time she possibly could to raise awareness of her missing boy.
So what do you think the main differences between the two cases are? Why do you think that the Madeleine McCann case, do you think it's an advancement of the times, technology?
Well, no,
like
let's talk about it cynically. Yeah. Cynically, Ben's family were from a working class background, if you want to look at it like that. Whereas Madeleine McCann's family were wealthy doctors, and a lot of people have argued, huge alleged here, connections with very powerful people. Obviously, what Ben Needham didn't have was Richard Branson donating all of the legal fees and all of the search fees to the Madeleine McCanns. They didn't have this huge swathe of the public donating money into a limited company rather than a charity, which we won't keep on going on about because we've said our piece on that as well. So there's more to the story, isn't there, with the Madeleine McCann case than there is the Ben Needham one?
I would say there's more controversy to the story with the Madeleine McCann case, and therefore we know controversy brings eyeballs to it. And it's a shame that, look, again, we're not actually stating that this is fact. We're implying from a cynic's point of view, you might perceive this perception in terms of working class compared to higher ups, doctors, things like that.
We're just saying this is actually what people have said or alleged is the reason why. Because if we're being completely honest, I don't know the reason why it's got less interest in the case. Because if you look at it from the outside, it's a young boy goes missing in a foreign location, very similar circumstances to Madeleine.
Not really, no.
Why not?
Just the holiday thing. I think the actual,
they're on a holiday
in terms of parental negligence, completely off the scale, completely different. Kerry was at work. She may have been serving tapas. She was not eating it and ordering bottles of wine to the table, leaving the kids on their own, stuff like that.
But you could argue that the circumstances are similar in that it's a young child going missing in a foreign location. They were both similar ages.
100%. I think they're very similar in those circumstances, but I'm just going to lay my cards on the table and say that I think that when you do look at the context of the two cases, I think the Needhams were probably treated horrifically if you're actually using the McCann investigation and Operation Grange as a measuring stick. But just to wrap up comparing the two cases, so to speak, Josh, what percentage chance, this is just your perception, what percentage chance would you now give, in your opinion, of Madeleine McCann being found alive and well?
I think less than 3 or 4%.
Would you?
Yeah.
That's high.
Yeah. Less than
3 or 4 means you could give it a 4%. You're giving it a 4% chance potentially.
Let's go less than 1%.
I think if we sat down and you properly started doing numbers like you do with us when we're doing the business stuff, I think you'd go way less than 1%.
Yeah, she's not going to be found. Basically, she's not going to be found. But also, there's always a small chance.
Always a small chance. Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, Gina DeHaye. We've seen it in a video we've covered after 10 years. But what would you say the chances are of Ben Needham being found? Not a loaded question. I want your actual opinion.
I would say more, but I wouldn't say it was very likely.
So you know that 3% that you used for Madeleine McCann?
Yeah.
That's what I used for Ben Needham.
Yeah, fair enough.
And for Madeleine McCann, I used 0.00003%.
Yeah.
I think that there has been so much more circumstantial evidence over the years to suggest that Ben Needham could be out there that, again, I just can't rule out that possibility.
Well, what? Because of men coming forward? They've all been ruled out, haven't they, at this point?
You could say that. I think even you struggle to give me an exact theory on what you believe happened with Madeleine McCann, right? And I'm using the two cases because they are very comparable, like you said, right? I don't struggle to give you a theory on what happened with Ben Needham. I'm very firm. I think Ben Needham was abducted.
Okay, and give your play-by-play of what you think happened then.
It may have been opportunistic, but I think it's more likely that Ben Needham was potentially targeted. I think that he potentially was abducted that day. I put a lot of weight on the fact that his clothes were taken from the washing line. I put a lot of weight on the fact that there is no evidence and has ever been any evidence that any harm was done. You know, if there was an accident that happened, accidents are very, very hard to cover up, and not in the time frame that was given. So to give you a difference in how I see the cases, right? No one knows. We only have official word. No one knows who last saw Madeleine McCann, do we?
No.
We've only got people's words to go by. We do know. Well, we do kind of know who last saw Ben Needham right?
Yeah.
We do know where Ben Needham was at that time. I think the circumstances are very different. Even if you just go from day to night, I think it's very, very different. Not only that, it was a very different time back then. It was a time when probably this sort of thing wasn't something that you would have your eye on or have your ears pricked for and be alerted for. And the main thing that I would say here is the fact that I don't believe that the Madeleine McCann case was an abduction. And obviously I've drawn that belief over the best part of 20 years of looking at the case. Shoot me down, it is what it is. You can believe whatever you want, I can believe whatever I want, and we'll all get along at the end of it. I do believe that Ben Needham was abducted, mate. I do believe. And do I have a strong opinion on that? No. But to form any kind of opinion, you have to work with the facts and the evidence you've got.
Yeah.
And I think that the evidence weighs stronger in the favour of an abduction.
Yeah. Well, can we talk about the evidence then and actually base your theory on some facts? Because I think what I've tried to do with the Dino theory is sort of provide the arguments for and the arguments against. And I think we also have the duty of being able to explain what the actual evidence is for the abduction.
Yep.
And I think it is quite difficult, the evidence for the abduction. Would you not say? Like there isn't a huge amount of, like, there's no photography of someone being in the area, for example. There's no physical evidence.
We mentioned 3 people in a car nearby.
But so let's talk about that. So basically,
no, let's talk about this.
Go on.
Right?
Go on.
All of the people throughout all of the years that implicated this woman called Maria. Can we find me some information on Maria from Corfu? Does anyone have the information on them? Because what I'm saying is this, right? It could sound very easy here, like I'm going, I've solved the Ben Needham case. This woman called Maria. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is I think that there's more weight, whether it's circumstantial or not. I think there's more weight to 17 unrelated calls coming in about this boy on a campsite. Yeah. And then another 5 Brits saying that they saw this woman that they believe to be Maria with this boy. Another 3 Greek people who are said to be unrelated saying that they saw this. You know, what you're going on, and I'm not saying that's your theory, but in terms of the deathbed confession, one person.
Yeah.
One person who's connected to the case and who may well have underlying
And he's unnamed, by the way.
Unnamed.
As well.
There you go. I'm going on about all of these people who weren't connected to the case. Maybe there were 17 glory hunters that felt like wasting police's time. Maybe
Which has happened.
It's happened, mate, yeah. But
not at the level that we're talking about. Like we have talked about in previous cases about, potentially 1, 2, 3 types of people that were, getting involved in cases that they shouldn't have been, and they were also lying. We saw it with Weird Jack, didn't we? Like someone that derailed a case because they wanted to have a bit of fame in their moment in the sun, didn't they? So yes, Maria could be implicated by people that are trying to do that, but also the counter to that is the level of people, 17 different examples. It's tough.
If I gave you a percentage for the level of coincidence that would have to have taken places, it's pretty blow your mind. Yeah,
it's a huge amount. And what we should say is that the police in Corfu did speak to a Maria, who they thought that was this woman, and she obviously vehemently denied having any involvement of this. She also said, by the way, and again, I don't even know if this is the Maria. What I will say at this point, because I mean, a
couple of decades have passed.
Yeah, and she's never been formally identified. Her image isn't out there. So it's very difficult to say a woman called Maria on Corfu was interviewed and therefore allowed to be let off. But apparently, this Maria said, ask anyone that I know, ask family that are around me, ask friends that live around me right now. They will tell you that I've only ever raised a daughter and I've never had a son.
But they did ask people she knew, and people did report to the police. So Maria's word is just one word against another. And it's one word against multiple others. Yeah, I'm sure you could get other people, but they did ask people she knew. Have a look at who some of the reports were from.
Yeah.
Wasn't one of the reports on Maria from an employer of hers? That's someone she knows.
I've heard that wasn't actually an employer, but it was a colleague, wasn't it, at the hotel?
Yeah, again, I should say alleged, but an alleged worker at a Corfu hotel came forward and spoke to the police.
And what we should say at this point, because you've summarised this, but I want to just clarify and contextualise it. There have been 300 sightings of people that could be Ben in various different locations all around the world. Now, what we will say in these missing person cases is that it's very easy to belittle these claims and say, well, obviously that's not him. How the hell could he have got to America? How the hell could he have ended up in Canada, etc. Right? But stranger things have happened than a boy flying from Cos, I should say, to North America. So you very much don't want to belittle this. And again, this is why we said at the very start, we're going to leave a link. There is a Facebook page that the Needham family have set up. So if there is any evidence or anything that you see Ben's image and you go, my God, I know someone that looks similar to him, then do report it. Because this is the thing, like, you know, often it's very innocuous sightings, people seeing people out, that ends up solving cases like this. And if Ben is out there and doesn't know his identity, then my God, you know, it could still be an open case.
Can I tell you my opinion? And this is literally just my opinion. I don't know why I've got this feeling, but, you know, I just sometimes get these feelings, yeah? Mate, I don't, in my personal opinion, I don't know if we'll ever find out what happened to Madeleine McCann.
Yeah.
I don't, in my personal opinion, know if we'll ever find out what happened to Andrew Gosden.
No.
In my opinion, I don't know why. I've got a feeling that we will find out what happened to Ben Needham.
And why? What are you basing that on?
I just feel like he's out there.
Yeah. What I'm getting based on that is you're saying you feel that Andrew and Madeleine have passed away.
Yeah, sorry, passed away.
Yeah. And so it's more likely that Ben is alive and therefore more likely that he's found.
I believe so.
You're of the same opinion of kind of like an Amy Bradley case. You feel like she's out there, she's going to be found eventually.
I wouldn't necessarily say. I definitely think Amy Bradley's out there.
Really?
Listen, every missing person, find me anyone apart from the ones that were found, every missing person we've ever covered on this channel, I just feel like Ben Needham could be out there.
Yeah.
Obviously, because of stories I've heard from trafficking around that time, not exactly from the island of Kos, but similar areas and stuff like that.
Yep.
Again, like now it's become a bit of a cliche in things, but like the desirable child, the young, blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy, things like that. The fact that different children since, including one named Maria, right, were found to be living with families that weren't theirs and things like that. This sort of thing has happened. And out of any case of any missing person that we've ever covered, I just think that there's the most chance that Ben Needham is legitimately out there somewhere.
Yeah. And this is what I will say, right? Please do let us know in the comments what you think happened in this case. Because what I will say is I have no idea what happened to Ben.
Is there a way we can poll it in the comments?
I think we probably could add a poll, but if
we'd be able to poll it just by eye.
If not, just write a comment and just say we think that Ben is still out there, or you think Ben's passed away.
And if you've got a theory, I'd love to know. Yeah,
this is the thing, because having chatted through this case for you, I was coming into this and going, probably do believe the Dino theory. Like it makes the most sense, and there is some evidence behind it. But now, after chatting with you, I've got less certainty. It's very much like the videos that we did on Madeleine. Like you convinced me otherwise. You know, you changed my opinion. So again, I'd love to know what the people in the comments think, and the people that watch these videos. And thank you so much for watching these videos. And if you aren't yet subscribed, which I know a lot of them aren't subscribed, then please do hit the subscribe button. It makes the absolute world, and it means that you can get more videos just like this. And while you're there, if you enjoyed this video, please do hit the like button.
Can I just give them the importance of subscribing, by the way? There are a lot of people that don't realise they're not subscribed to us. When someone comments, we know usernames, don't we?
Yeah.
Like, we literally know.
Well, there's a little badge to say if you're a subscriber as well, by the way.
Exactly. Sometimes you'll click on it and it will say 14 previous comments left on this channel, which means you've commented on half the videos and they're not subscribed. And every comment is smashing it again, gents. Well done, blah, blah, blah. So please, if you're one of those people, make sure you are subscribed, and also do us a massive favour. We've seen them returning it a little bit now. If you are someone that qualifies, not everyone can hype a video, but some people can. And if that's you, please do that one for us. It helps the videos get out there. It helps us get out there. And as always now, it's pretty much a rule on this channel. It's another case recommendation from our members. You can become a member of this channel, leave your own blueprint on it, and have your suggestions possibly covered by joining up. There's a link in the description. It's less than the price of a cup of coffee. And it's a case, this one, that has been requested from day one, and one that I've always been very interested in covering. So let's see what they come up with for us next.
Yes, thank you so much to all of the members. You know how special you are, and you are officially a part of the hardcore. Thank you so much. If you did enjoy this video, why don't you watch another video which is on screen right now, which has to obviously be the first video that we did on the Madeleine McCann case. Probably one of the videos that made this channel as famous as it is. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you in the next one.